Japan is a nation where, despite its slightly troubled past, is ultimately still quite a fun country to play in HoI4. I wanted to do a navy build for this game, but I don't think that ended up really going through. We mostly focused on army, to be honest. I'd say the victory conditions are capitulate China, take the Raj and Indonesia, and land in the US. So I started the game off by purging the Kodha faction, and then we built some civs to start kickstarting the industry. And then I did the basic researches, and I invested some research into tanks, as this is something I wanted to get out later. Then we began training the Imperial Japanese Navy for the upcoming war with China, although we wouldn't be needing it that much, obviously. Shortly after that, I received word that Italy had abandoned the naval treaty, which gave me some ideas, shall we say. I then attempted to pass the National Mobilization Law, so that we could work our way down to the National Defense State, which allowed us to get Total Mob, which gave us plus 30% military factory construction speed. I then realised that we actually don't have much iron in our country, so I started to eye up the surrounding regions to see where I should invade first to get some sweet natural resources. Obviously, as this was meant to be a naval build, I did go for the Yamato because, I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. Then I started to make some pretty chonky divisions for me to send to the Spanish Civil War so that I could grind XP. I did realise though that I sent this to the wrong Spain. I sent it to Republican Spain rather than Nationalist Spain. I tried to delete the divisions so that I could maybe send divisions to Nationalist Spain, but it turns out that isn't something that actually fixes the problem. So I tried to save Scum and go back, but it turns out I didn't have a save further enough back. So I eventually just accepted my fate and fought for the Republicans. Sorry, Nationalist Spain, which is not a sentence I thought I would ever say. I'm not sure that many people actually know this, but if you assign a garrison order to a general in a neutral location, they will actually just passively learn the organizer trait, which is quite useful actually. I finally got down to the National Defense State focus in December 1936, which meant we got the plus 30% military factory construction speed so we could just start pumping out mills. I ended up managing to encircle a Spanish pocket, because at this point I was just sort of playing the game and trying to get as much XP as possible. It's a little bit awkward that I backstabbed Nationalist Spain and I'm now killing off their divisions, but don't worry Spain, it's all for the greater good, I promise. With military factory construction speed bonuses in hand, I just started going crazy with the military factories, just spamming them out. I mean, just look at all those bonuses. It's beautiful. It's a 95% bonus in total. I also managed to seize the Spanish gold reserves to get some extra consumer goods bonuses, which is just fantastic. And finally, although it was while I was not paying attention, we did manage to liquidate the Spanish pocket. After liquidating the Spanish pocket, I just thought, whatever, we'll push westwards and just mess with Spain even more, because at this point, I can't do much worse, can I? The extra XP was worth it. We did manage to cut Spain in half. I then moved north to inflict more damage as the front line was open. Then, in December 1937, I put up my navy and declared war on China. A little late, but better late than never. You then of course always have to remember to escalate the war in China, or you get some pretty nasty debuffs which makes it really difficult to push. At the start of the war I was having some trouble pushing because of the debuffs, but after we got some shore bombardment and we got rid of some of the debuffs, we were able to push quite nicely. From there, there's really no other way to describe it other than that we steamrolled China. I eventually managed to flank the northern front and encircled the Chinese Beijing defense in the north. After liquidating the Chinese pocket in Beijing, I began planning a breakthrough south, but before I did that, I planned a naval invasion of the Shandong Peninsula, involving a few heavy-hitting soft-attack marine divisions that I made, as well as some supporting divisions. The naval invasion ended up in a resounding success, as despite the Chinese having all of the divisions in the world, they did not garrison their ports. Eventually, the naval landing managed to connect up with our northern front, which left an opening in the southern part of the Chinese front lines. I attempted to get an encirclement around the city of Jinan, but the Chinese troops did manage to counter-encircle me, but eventually we managed to free our troops and secure the encirclement. So apparently the US isn't very happy when you sink one of their ships, so I decided to agree to the American terms and apologize for that. I couldn't really be bothered to deal with the Americans right now. So at this point I exploited the weak Chinese defences in the south, and started to push through to Nanjing. And eventually we did manage to capture Nanjing, which opened up the entire southern front to further expansion owing to the supply hub in the area. And eventually, as promised, I did invade Guangxi so that I could capture the iron in the region, and it took me a while to decide where exactly I wanted to land, but I decided I would land just south of Nanning so that I could quickly go north and capture the VPs in the area. Then, about a month later, I launched the naval invasions and they all landed successfully. I then pushed north and took Nanning, which shortly after led to the capitulation of the Guangxi clique, when my armies from the east began to arrive on their eastern borders as well. I did, however, launch a small naval invasion into Guangzhou so that I could capture that major victory point and speed up the capitulation. It was at this point where I just decided that I couldn't really be bothered to micro anything anymore, so I just sort of took all my armies, plopped them on the front line, and just gave them offensive orders until China inevitably capitulates. A couple months later, and I had made it to the Chinese capital of Chongqing. However, it was at about this point that the front line kind of reached a standstill because the supply just got utterly horrible. As you can see, continuing to attack the capital from here was just not getting us anywhere. So eventually I gave in and just waited for a supply hub to be constructed in the area. I somehow ended up getting into this little dance with the Chinese troops of just going in and out of this one province where they'd attack and get in and I'd attack and get them back. And this went on for the entire time until the supply hub was eventually constructed. I just sort of found this quite funny. Finally, in December of 1939, the supply hub was constructed, and it just immediately fixed the supply issue, which was so satisfying for me, because the supply issues had delayed the end of the war by multiple months. And so, in January of 1940, we captured the Chinese capital, and China finally surrendered. I decided to just nab the east coast of China because I can, as well as the iron in Guangxi clique, although I could have just gotten resource rights for that, but I kind of just wanted it. And then I puppeted the rest of China because I didn't want to have to deal with the garrisons, and I probably end up getting more factories out of this way anyway. So the next thing I did was to demand Indochina from Vichy France. I wasn't entirely expecting them to accept, but actually luckily they did, after I improved relations with them. That was really good because it meant I could finally get more rubber, which was in short supply. I then finally started to design the base for the tank destroyers I was going to make, so that I could start producing these to get the production efficiency beforehand and later convert them into proper tank destroyers while I was researching heavy cannons too. These were then almost immediately put into production. I finally then started the ultimate battleship focus, which gave us 2 nearly finished Yamato class super heavy battleships. It was around this point that I decided I should actually invest into my navy more, since we would be fighting the US soon, so I did grant draft exemptions so that we could increase our dockyard output. I also designed some carrier naval bombers, because what's the point of an aircraft carrier if you don't fill them up with planes? So I made a pretty simple design so that our aircraft carriers could actually be effective. Finally, the focus finished, and we got 2 super heavy battleships that I put right at the top of the production line, because they're so much better than those cruisers.
Oh, who is she?
tried to do a border war with the Soviets, so I placed some divisions on the border with Vladivostok, but I actually did something wrong here. I didn't realize that you had to place them on the border in North Korea specifically, so I actually missed the window opportunity, and the border war never happened, which was unfortunate. Then, with war with the Allies looming, I began to set up naval invasions into Malaysia and the Dutch East Indies, as well as into Burma. I set up a small invasion to cut off the southern troops in Burma. It was only at this point that I realised that my TD base had the wrong turret on it, and I accidentally put the medium turret instead of the heavy turret on it, so I couldn't even put the gun I wanted onto it, which meant that the entire production efficiency had to be destroyed while I replaced that, which was really annoying. But I continued on and declared war on Malaysia and the Dutch East Indies. I launched my naval invasions into Malaysia and some of the Dutch East Indies, which were both successful. The invasion in the western part of Malaysia also advanced without meeting much opposition, so overall the invasion was a success. Apparently some Indian rebels wanted to help me in my war, which gave me some nice attack bonuses against Burma and India, which I definitely took. I managed to split the Burmese front in two, which meant that we could close off the encirclements in the south, and we got quite a lot of troops there. After that, I started planning an invasion of the main islands of the Dutch East Indies, and then I noticed that I had left Hong Kong unguarded, but luckily I had an army on standby to go and deal with the invasion. But seriously, I think I've forgotten about Hong Kong in just about every one of my Japan games. The invasion of Burma was going smoothly, especially on the western front, and I also started attacking from the northern front, which seemed to be very successful, so we were really pressuring Burma at this point. Not too long after I realised the Hong Kong invasion, Hong Kong fell, and soon after Burma also fell, which created a lot of pockets. The naval landings in the Dutch East Indies also went, and each and every one of them was a success, and so we started advancing through the Dutch islands. After capturing the southern portion of the island, we then advanced north and captured all of the main Dutch East Indies islands. The Indian front came to a bit of a standstill due to supply issues, so I began to plan a naval invasion to go behind the Indian lines and encircle the front line. The naval invasions met literally no resistance, so they just landed and started moving north to encircle the troops on the front line. The Indian front was eventually surrounded, and we had one big encirclement with all of the frontline troops. After taking the supply hub in the encirclement, we managed to push in as the supply was eviscerated. Now here comes the disappointing part. I had my navy out in the Indian Ocean, and we had a large-scale naval battle with the British, of which I got completely destroyed, mostly because of my lack of light attack. So after this battle, I immediately went to constructing more cruisers that are incredibly light attack based, and so hopefully we could get into a future battle with much more light attack and be able to kill their screens. I also started to spam out dockyards, just for good measure. Finally, in late February 1942, the Raj capitulated. Here I'm designing the cruiser that was light attack based that I mentioned earlier. I don't really know if it's, meta or anything, but it is what I made.